Hey art friends, it's Miss T, and we're going to create something called optical illusion weaving. Now it's called weaving because we take strips of paper and we weave them in and out of the background paper. So for example, the background paper is the black construction paper, and then I used two different colors and cut them into strips and weave them in and out of the black background paper. So weaving is kind of like sewing with a needle, but we use paper instead. So here's my example. So everybody's gonna get a piece of black construction paper. Excuse me. I want you to take that and we're gonna have it horizontally, like mine. We're gonna fold it in half and match up the corners. And when you have a good match, go ahead and crease the other side. And then with a pencil, we're going to create lines of where we're going to cut. Now I want you to leave a thick border around the edge. So why don't we go ahead and with our pencil, we're gonna create a border. It's kind of like how thick my thumb is. Do you see that? And I'm gonna go down this side too. Again, that's how thick my thumb is. And on the other side. So we have our crease on this side, the opening on the right side. We've made a border, and this is where we're not going to cut. Again, the border is where we're not going to cut. And then I'm going to create either straight lines or diagonal lines or wavy lines or zigzag lines, however you want. So I'm just gonna draw where I want to cut. And I'm going to make sure it touches that border line. So I'm gonna make a bunch of different types of lines. I think I'll just do a pattern. I'll do zigzag, then wavy, and then zigzag again, and wavy. And I want you to space them out. See how much space is in between each of my lines? I want you to keep it that far away. So I was able to fit 2, 4, 5. I was able to fit 5 lines. So once you have your lines, take your scissors, and on the crease side, we're gonna start cutting. So you're gonna follow the lines that you drew and cut, and stop at the border line, and then keep going. Now, since we have all these flaps of paper, we need to be very gentle so that we don't accidentally rip or tear anything, because that would just throw the whole thing off. So be gentle when you're doing this. Okay, so now that I've cut my lines, I'm gonna go ahead and open my paper. So now this is where all these flaps, where we're going to weave the strips of colored paper. Before we do that, we need to number our paper. So we're actually going to turn our paper vertically. And this first strip, we're going to number with 1s. So I'm using a white crayon, but you can use a pencil. So I'm just gonna go down that first strip and I'm gonna number it with the number 1. My second strip is a 2. My next strip is going back to number 1. The next one is a 2. And then a 1. And then last one is a 2. If you happen to have another strip, that would be a 1. Okay. I'm gonna set this aside. I'm gonna let you guys choose 2 different colors of construction paper. Keep these vertical long ways because they need to be able to fit. You see how it fits in the black construction paper? If you cut it this way, it's gonna be too short. You see that? So make sure your construction paper is long ways, vertical. And what I'm doing is I'm just stacking one on top of the other. And then I'm gonna cut them in strips. Don't make them super duper skinny. Give them a nice medium thickness. It's okay if they're not completely straight, but just try your best to cut them as straight as possible. I'm gonna stop right there. If I need more, I can just cut this later. All right, now I'm gonna bring back my black construction paper. Now we get to the weaving part. I'm gonna start with my dark blue. And I'm gonna start on the left-hand side. And with my number 1, I'm going to lift that piece up and slide my blue underneath. Do you see how that went underneath? And then I'm gonna scoot it forward, and you see now that it's gonna lay on top of the number 2. Now when I get to the next number 1, I'm gonna lift that one up and slide this under. It's gonna overlap, it's gonna go over the number 2. When I reach the next number 1, I'm gonna lift it up and slide my blue paper under it. And then eventually I'll reach the end of the black paper. And now you only see number 1s. 1, 1, 1. And the blue construction paper has covered the number 2s. I'm also going to scoot it to the edge of the black paper as best I can, as much as it'll let me, because where we drew our border is stopping the paper. So that's pretty good right there. Now I'm gonna take my second color, my orange. This time I'm gonna skip my number 1 and I'm going to lift the number 2. So lift the number 2 and scoot that second color in. It's going to go over the number 1. Lift the number 2, scoot it in. Go over the number 1. Lift the number 2 and scoot it in. And I'm gonna make sure that this edge matches up with the edge of the black. And then I'm gonna scoot the strip of paper as close as possible to my blue one. Now we're gonna go back to our first color. Mine was the blue. And we're gonna go back to number 1. So lift the number 1. Now, if you happen to lift this too much, what's happening to my orange? It's popping underneath. So I gotta make sure that that stays where it is. So lift the number 1, scoop my paper in. Lift the next number 1, scoop the paper in. The next number 1, scoop the paper in. And then slide it. Slide it as best you can. You gotta be very gentle because it's easy to get the paper torn or ripped. And then you're just going to repeat the process, switching your colors and switching the 1 or the 2 that you lift up. So I'm gonna try to do this quickly. Now, let me show you how you know you make a mistake. Now, how do I know that I just made a mistake? Because these two are matching up. They're both being shown on the number 1s. You see that? They're supposed to alternate. 1, 1, 1. It's showing on the 2s. So I have to take this one out and I have to redo it. See, now when we start weaving, all this is gonna start popping up. So you gotta constantly keep adjusting it and keep working it. And keep sliding them over. Oops, see, I made a mistake. I skipped one. So this is under, over, under. We need to go over this one. And then under and over. So it's easy to get confused. You just gotta make sure you're keeping an eye on things. Now when you start to get to the end, it might be a little hard to lift up the paper. Just try your best to be gentle. Excuse me. And the last one might be a little tight to fit in. So just try your best. If you need help with the last one, just raise your hand and I will come over and help you. Be careful not to rip the black paper as well. All right. Excuse me. So what I'm doing is I'm making sure all the pieces are at the edge of the black paper. I'm gonna turn this over. Now we have our nice clean side. It's looking good. And lastly, we're gonna take glue. And once we have the edges the way we want them, we're gonna glue down the flaps so they don't move anymore. And we can have a finished piece of paper weaving. See, this blue one just slid, so I'm gonna readjust that one before I glue it down. I'm gonna turn it over and do the other side as well. So that all my flaps are still and stationary and don't move. And just give it a few minutes to dry and you have your finished piece.